Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm going to be reviewing A Long, Long Sleep by Anna Sheehan. And this is a non-spoiler review, so if you haven't read the book yet and are trying to decide if it's something you'd like, then feel free to watch it, you won't be spoiled. So, this book is sort of described as a science fiction, almost post-dystopian Sleeping Beauty story. And we follow our main character, Rosalinda, or Rose, who wakes up from stasis, this sort of medically induced coma, to find that several decades have passed since she was put into this sleep. The world as she knows it is gone, basically, or it's changed almost beyond recognition for her in some ways, and everyone she loves and cares about has died. So, real rough start to her reintroduction to the world. And nobody alive even knows that she exists. Everyone is shocked that her parents had a daughter because they were very visible people. She's actually the heir to this intergalactic commercial empire called Unicorp. And the company is still going strong, more or less, but nobody really was looking for her. Nobody knew she was alive. So that's a lot for her to deal with when she wakes up. And we kind of follow her as she adapts, or she tries to adapt to this almost new world where a lot of things are unfamiliar to her, and we kind of see her decide if she wants to try and live a new kind of life, because she's kind of getting a fresh start in the worst way possible. And that's sort of the basic overview of the plot. So, going into this book, I had sort of low expectations, only because it had sort of mediocre reviews on Goodreads. I hadn't really heard a lot about it. I didn't hear it recommended from anyone, really. I just hadn't heard a lot of buzz about this book. But it was the kind of thing where the premise was interesting enough to me that I thought, yeah, I'm still gonna pick it up. I'll get it from the library because I'm interested enough to see how it turns out, but I won't buy it. That was sort of my pre-formed opinions going into this book. And I'm happy to say that I was actually extremely pleasantly surprised. So many complex things in this book that I maybe wasn't expecting. For instance, the side characters I felt were all very well developed. Even the ones that you only get brief glimpses of, you really feel like they're important to the story and you sort of want to know more about them, and even the ones you don't necessarily like, they're definitely interesting. I also loved the way that the physical and especially psychological effects of what happened to Rose it really explored in the story. So, you know, just from the summary, it sounds like a very overwhelming experience for a person to wake up in this new world and everyone she loves is dead. Obviously that's something that's going to be hard, but I really appreciated the sometimes surprising reactions she had to things. You know, there were some aspects of her life that were completely easy for her to sink back into, and then there were other things that just threw her for a loop because they weren't around when she was, you know, before she was frozen. I just really loved the realistic way that these issues were all addressed. You know right from the beginning that this isn't going to be an easy fix, you know, which I kind of liked, that Rose really had to go through a lot because it's hard to lose your world. So it makes sense that she wouldn't necessarily just get back on the horse and, you know, continue living. And Rose as a main character. That was one of the aspects that I kind of expected to drag down my rating, if I'm being honest, because I had seen a few reviews that described her as very weak or a pushover or even bland because she doesn't really make any of her own decisions and all of that. So I kind of went into this with very low expectations for Rose personally, but I actually ended up really enjoying her because throughout the book we get a really good understanding of why she is the way she is. Based on her upbringing and her experiences and who she is as a person, we, as the readers, sort of come to understand what made her this way. So I feel like even though some of her actions or lack of actions could be frustrating to some people, for me personally, getting that backstory and that development meant that she wasn't annoying to read from, even at the beginning where she's very passive. And one of the really cool things I thought about that was that we're actually getting to understand Rose as she is remembering herself, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is Rose is becoming aware of and like remembering her personality at the same time that the reader's understanding how she developed. So there's some things that we learn about her past and her family and her experiences that really make sense with how she turned out. And it was really great to sort of discover that along with her. You know, it wasn't like we were 4 steps ahead and just waiting for her to catch up. It felt really organic, which I really enjoyed. And then by the end of the novel, when she really sort of comes into her own, it feels so well earned and worth it because we had all that build up and all that exploration. So I really loved that. I'm just going to touch really briefly on the plot. Overall, I really enjoyed it. And I actually found it more surprising than I anticipated, obviously. Because there were several points where I thought I could predict where the story was going or what was going to happen. And I was actually wrong, which, you know, the more you read, I feel like the less you get surprised. So that was really cool that it took a couple of turns that I wasn't expecting. So I loved that aspect. And then as far as the retelling part goes, aside from the initial setup, you know, the fact that she was awoken from her sleep by this boy, aside from that, I feel like there weren't too many direct parallels between Sleeping Beauty and Rose. You know, you could make the argument that, well, she's the heir of this galactic empire, so she's sort of like a princess and all of that. You can kind of make that argument, but the story wasn't really tied down by adhering too close to the original fairy tale, which I appreciated. You know, there's some retellings I've read that work very well because they stick very close to the source material, and I feel like this one went the opposite direction and sort of took inspiration from Sleeping Beauty, but I don't think I would necessarily call it a retelling. But you can certainly see those elements there, and that was one of the reasons I picked it up, so I understand why they marketed it that way. I only have a couple of negative things about this book. One of them was concerned with the mystery or sort of like danger element of the story. It doesn't really become important until most of the way through the book, so it didn't really detract from it, but I do feel like it was maybe not as engaging as Rose's personal journey. And I understand why it was included, and it does give you some important backstory and plot discussion, but overall I feel like it could have been cut out and I would have enjoyed this story just as much. And then the only other thing is sort of a like plus minus situation because it concerns Rose's romantic entanglements, of which there are a couple. The thing about these romantic relationships is that they were sometimes really uncomfortable because of the premise of the book. Like all of this weird time stuff, and she's not really the age she's supposed to be because she was frozen in sleep, but in some ways she acts really young, and in some ways she acts much older than she is, and like all these weird things sort of mean that any potential romantic relationship that she has with some of the other characters has sort of their own brand of like little squick, you know? But that being said, I do think that was an interesting aspect of this whole stasis discussion. So I'm not sure I would have cut it out, but it's just know going into it that the shipping aspect is a little strange. So to sum up, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And I recommend it. If any of these things sound interesting to you, I think you would really enjoy this book. So, that's all I have for today, and I will see you guys soon with another video. Bye!